Now we are going to deploy this developer portal. So we have two components here. The first one is this Gloo Mesh Portal Server, which is a backend that provides a well-defined API that's going to be used by the developer portal content to know which API to show which user when they've been authenticated. So we first need to configure this component and to expose this API provided by this component so we can go ahead and create this route table for sending requests to this portal server. We see another nice feature of these route tables where you can define a default destination that's going to be used by all the different routes. So that I don't need to again define that many times. And here I said that I want to expose the API through the /v1 path and send this path for the backend, but expose it to this portal server /v1. But if there is a cookie that is provided by the user, then I basically want to follow this OAuth workflow so that I can extract the information from Redis and other locations as well. So basically, to summarize, I want to expose the backend API both securely and publicly so that if there is a request that is coming from a user who is not authenticated in the portal, it's going to follow these specific routes. And I'm going to show you the public APIs I want to expose these APIs publicly. And if a user goes through this route and they are authenticated, then we're good. Then I want to demonstrate to them that the API that they should have access to. So that's basically what this route table is doing. And now that I see that if I send a request to this backend API, I can see an error that tells me there is no portal config created. So I'm going to create this portal object that defines the portal backend I want to use, which is the one I have shown you before I define this usage plan, the way I want them to be displayed to my end user, and which APIs I want to expose, which are in my route table. So it's kind of the API product. So I want to expose my API that is composed of the openlibrary.org and the product page API stitched together. So that's my portal object. And now again, you can basically send the same request that I sent before. And in that case, you see I'm not authenticated, so I don't see any sort of APIs returned. It's just that there's no public API, and I didn't configure any of these APIs to be public. So that's normal. And if I send a request to this backend server without authentication, I actually get no result. So now I'm going to create what we call a portal group. So we define some users and what kind of access they have to which resources. Here I'm going to say if a user is authenticated with the OIDC workflow, and we also receive this JOT token with a value name key in a group and a value users, then I want to provide access to the API that these portal users equals true, which is a label, and I want to assign this usage plan gold. So I'm just creating this, and later on you will see that I can authenticate later with a user that's called user1 that is part of this users group. So you will have access to this API that we created before because we had these labels on it, and we'll have access to this usage plan. What I need to do now is to deploy the front end. So the front end is provided as a Node.js application as a template that you have the ability to fully customize. So we can go ahead and customize this template. Now, if I open that link, You can see that it's a public repo, and you can fully customize this portal the way you need to. So in my case, I already downloaded it, so I don't need to really do anything. You can also access this with NPX, and you have other ways to download it and get access to it as well. If you need to, you can customize it with a special logo and do various other things, and then you can proceed to go ahead and build it. I'll just go ahead and create a Docker image for it, and I'm just going to push this to a local registry. But obviously, in your case, you're probably not going to use a local registry. You probably have a public registry like Docker Hub or the GitHub Container Registry. I already compiled it, and then I'm going to go ahead and deploy this application just like a standard Kubernetes deployment. Now here in my Kubernetes cluster, I can even deploy it in the Gloo Mesh add-ons namespace, but it could really be deployed anywhere. So if I go to my first cluster, I can see that there is this front end being initialized, and now I can expose this content. So again, using a route table, you start to see what's really used, and then we can also go ahead and define different paths, and we define which one we want to authenticate the user. So if the users click on a login button, then I want to send the request to the portal front end. But I want to have authentication with OIDC. Otherwise, I don't need to authenticate the request. So I can go ahead and apply this route table, and now I should be able to go over to this main page here, and if we give it a few seconds, I should be redirected to this developer portal that I just deployed. We can see that right now I don't have any APIs that are public. So I cannot see any API, and I can also see that right now we use this secret for applying the OAuth workflow, because we also want to secure, if you remember here I said, if the requests go to this path with the login, so if the user goes ahead and clicks on the login button, I want to make sure that it's going to be authenticated. That's why I went ahead and added this OAuth equals true. So I'm going to configure the OIDC workflow for the front end. So if you've already watched the video where I explained how to do that for the HTTP bin, it's following the exact same example and principle. Applying this to the route table with OAuth equals true, and defining different parameters for keycloak. So I can go ahead and secure access here. And I can go ahead and create the XAuth server again. I have just one in this cluster, which is generally the most common pattern we'll find. And now that I have the XAuth policy enforced, I should be able to access the portal securely. So if I click on the login button, I'm automatically redirected to Keycloak. And I can see here that I can go ahead and sign in, and now I can access my API. And I can see this API because I'm successfully authenticated, and I can witness that I have access to the book info API.